Welcome to Riviera Rats, a Palme d'Or podcast. I am Bill.
I'm Greg.
And despite the fact that I've been trying to get this show done through intermediaries, I am forced to do it directly with my co-host. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing okay, Bill. How are you doing? What's new with you in movies?
Oh, well, since we last recorded, you and I watched the Palme d'Or winner, Nära. We were big
Sure, we did.
fans. I'm a big
And
fan. I am curious to see by the time this episode comes out where it is placing in the awards season track, because this will come out in January, so all the groups will have given out their awards. And I have a feeling it is going to be this year's LA Confidential. I have a feeling it's going to do really well with all the critics groups. And then, as you say, they're going to go for something more respectable by the time the major awards come around.
That's right. I think our winner of the year is probably Conclave.
Which we also saw and I really enjoyed.
I did. It's movies we deserve more of. It's John Grisham fare.
Yeah, but done well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's gussied up way more.
And done with money. I feel like it's the kind of movie that Netflix has been making for the last 10 years on a micro budget.
Yeah, that's true. No, this movie it didn't cut any corners.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the money it had to pay in permits to film in the Vatican.
I don't think they filmed in the Vatican. They filmed in Rome, but I think that they filmed in classy looking buildings that looked like that, but they weren't allowed to actually film in the Vatican. That's what I read, but I could be wrong.
Oh, like from having been to the Vatican, I honestly thought lots of it was, but I'm like that might just be a testament to how good of a job they did.
Well, and don't forget how good a job they can do with green screen these days of having people walk on blank stages and turning them into whatever background they want.
Well, then that's very impressive, because I remember watching it and thinking like, I've been there. Well, guess what? No, you hadn't.
I mean, they didn't explode the ceiling of a spoiler alert of a real, classical building. So
they also didn't explode a ceiling, Bill. That's visual effects.
But that's what I mean. So,
yes.
Yeah. And I wonder if they were even filming in a room that had that high a ceiling. Like, I wonder if that was also an illusion.
I also have seen, and I look forward to your review of Emilia Perez.
Yeah, I'm hoping to watch that this week. I have Netflix right now, so I'm going to check it out because I think you can't see it on a big screen anymore.
No, it was only out for a week, so I grabbed it when I could.
Yeah.
It's, for better or for worse, you've seen nothing like it.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like Jacques Audiard to me. And then, of course, you and I also had the pleasure of once again being in the presence of a relative of greatness. Last night, Joan Crawford's grandson, Casey Lalonde, came to Toronto for the second time to show more home movies and another Joan Crawford feature. I hope he keeps doing it. I asked him, like, when's part 3? And he's like, I don't know, we'll get it done. I said, yeah, do it. Even if you run out of home movies, keep coming back and keep showing her freaking films,
Absolutely.
I want to see a woman's face on the big screen. I want to see humoresque,
I want to see Grand Hotel.
Yeah.
Can I add, I want to say, I also want to watch her movies shown sincerely. I don't like mischievous faggots showing straitjacket.
Which I attended last year, and it kind of annoyed me that people were laughing out loud throughout the whole movie, because I get that it's not a serious movie. But at the same time, can we not approach these things in the spirit to which they are made? And can we not just travel back a little in time? I was actually talking about this with our friend Jill last night while you were in the bathroom snorting cocaine. And because the movie last night was Johnny Guitar. And I was telling her, I get a little tired of this whole turning strong women of the past into camp figures. I know that a lot of it is done affectionately. I'm not humorless enough to really have a problem with this. But there's a point at which it's like, can we also talk about the fact that Joan Crawford was this technically perfect actor who really knew what she was doing on screen? Can I not take that seriously? Does it always have to be a joke because her shoulders are wide and her lipstick is huge? And, like, I get it. But at the same time, it gets a little tiring. And there's no male figures of camp. It's always women who are indomitable that are turned into kind of a joke. And it can catch me on the wrong day is what I suppose I mean.
No, I agree. I think the closest thing we have to a male camp figure like that is Orson Welles.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, shall I talk about this year's festival?
Yes, please tell us what we are covering today, Greg.
This is our 11th Cannes Film Competition, and it ran May 2nd to 18th, 1958. Some notable things happened at this festival. We had royalty in the house. Prince Filippo showed up with his lava, Belinda Lee. And I should mention he's from the Orsini family.
Which, as far as I know, is still a going. That family is still like somewhere in Italy being aristocratic.
Yeah, I think that happens to a lot of monarchs. They just sort of dilute and then stay rich.
Yeah, well, yeah, because they probably opened a line of biscuits like Prince Charles did. But yeah, anyway, go on.
Anyway, they had a highly publicized affair, and this is around a time that a lot of actors or people in pop culture are dating up and matching with with royals. It's covered extensively in that Dolce Vita confidential book we
This
talked about.
particular affair is also covered quite extensively, which is also what led me to write it down. But yeah.
She was shooting The Goddess of Love in Italy. That's where they met just a year before, and they were. This was an extramarital affair, which we know
For
from
both of them, yeah.
we know in this decade means a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then she died at 25 in a car crash.
Yes, and he died later, but they had both tried to commit suicide because they were so in love with each other and their romance was hopeless. And the point of us including it here is that it's considered to be the climax of their affair when they attend the Cannes Film Festival together and are photographed extensively at events during this year's festival.
Can you imagine, like, what do you say in French when you're calling like someone a harlot or a whore on the croisette?
Putain.
Putain.
Mm.
And then this was also the year that François Truffaut was banned for being a snob.
Yeah, that's right. About friendly persuasion. Yeah.
That's right. Bill, why don't you tell us about what else is happening in film competitions?
Yes, of course. Not too much because, of course, in the early years of Cannes, we don't have a lot of other competitions outside the Offiche. Gigi by Vincent Minnelli was screened out of competition. And then later that year, this probably coincided. I can't remember the release date in the US, but it probably was around the same time. And then later that year, or in the following spring, I should say, at the Academy Awards, it won 8 Oscars, I believe. It swept anyway, and it earned Vincent Minnelli his Best Director Oscar. Mon Oncle was the Best Foreign Language Film at that year's Oscars, which figures into our competition today and is one of the award winners because Jacques Tati was extremely popular in North America, and we'll talk about that in a second.
Mm-hmm.
The Golden Lion in Venice went to Rickshaw Man by Hiroshi Inagaki. I've never seen it, but I love Inagaki. I believe he's the one who did the Samurai trilogy with Toshiro Mifune. That is, I've watched the whole thing like 4 times. It's so great. And the Golden Bear in Berlin went to Bergman for Wild Strawberries, which is probably my favorite of his films. And
Really?
I think so. When I think about my favorites, I always think of that and Autumn Sonata first. Those are the 2 that I think of first.
I think I like my Bergman frigid.
Yeah, well, that's Wild Strawberries, is it not? It's
Oh,
a
I find it on the
sentimental.
sentimental side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like the way he does sentimentality. He's quite frigid about it, you know.
Yeah. That's probably fair to say.
Like he picks up that couple who are fighting and he doesn't fix their marriage. They don't gain perspective from having ridden with him. He's just glad to be rid of them.
Bill, do you know or do you recall any songs from Gigi?
I thought you were going to ask me about the songs from Wild Strawberries. No, Gigi. So this is something somebody schooled me on. It's based on a play, which in turn is based on the novel by Colette. I've always meant to read Colette. I've never read her. I do enjoy her vibe, her sort of bored fin de siècle, retired courtesans vibe. There's a film of another one of her books called Sherry with Michelle Pfeiffer, reuniting with Stephen Frears and Christopher Hampton, that I find really charming. And then Gigi was adapted from the book to a play. Audrey Hepburn was in it. And I didn't realize that the play wasn't a musical. They added the songs for this film version, and I don't remember any of them. I also haven't seen the movie in more than 20 years. I don't know. I think it's a beautiful movie that means very little to me. As Michael
Feeling-
Gebert says, that the whole thing looks like a Fabergé egg come to life.
Oh, I was thinking about Fabergé eggs watching one of our other movies today.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Greg, who was on the jury this year?
Well, we're covering the 50s, so we actually have to do some research.
Yeah, you did the research. I didn't do shit.
So our jury president for the first of two times is Marcel Achard. He's a playwright and screenwriter. We would know him in North America for Shot in the Dark by Blake Edwards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Which the original play is not a Pink Panther play, and then they added Inspector Clouseau for the movie.
that's right.
Yeah.
But he was a playwright before a screenwriter, and his most controversial play is about a sad homosexual. It's called Adam.
Oh, it's not called Bill and Greg host a podcast? That's interesting.
Bill and Bill and Greg's bogus journey about sad homosexuals. Also in the jury, we've got Tomiko Asabuki, who is a modernist Japanese author and translator with strong influences from French philosophy.
Mhm.
She spent some time with Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir. We've got Bernard Buffet, who, please, Bill, go look up his paintings. They're so dreary.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, really funny painter. No, funny is not the word I should be using. I was just entertained. We've got Jean de Baroncelli, a French. No, I'm saying that like an Italian. How do I say that last name?
No, it's probably De Baroncelli. He could be French, but of Italian background.
Correct, right.
Mm.
He is a French film critic. He wrote for Le Monde. We've got German filmmaker Helmut Kautner, who had competed 3 times at Cannes in the 40s and 50s, including in 49 with the movie The Original Sin, though we weren't able to watch that one when we covered that year. We've got Dudley Lessey, a screenwriter and playwright. Have you ever heard of The Human Touch?
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, it seemed to be his most notable.
Mm.
Madeline Robinson, who would the following year win the Volpe Cup for Best Actress for a movie called Web of Passion.
Oh.
Ladislau Vaida, who competes 4 times in the 50s, so stay tuned to hear this person's name a few more times.
Mm.
Charles Vidor of Gilda fame, which
Yep.
competes in the first year of this festival. Sergei Yutkevich, who competed 4 times, beginning with the first festival, and he wins the directing prize twice. And Cesare Zavattini, a screenwriter who famously wrote Umberto D., worked with a lot of other famous auteurs, and is one of the earliest theorists of neorealism.
That's right, and was nominated for Oscars for his writing as well. He's the name on here that I know the best, other than Charles Vidor.
Bill, won't you tell us about the competition list?
Absolutely. We had a bit of a light assignment on this show because, as is often going to be the case from movies of the 50s and 60s, a lot of them have just disappeared into the ether.
It's true.
Maybe if we put a little money into this show, we could travel the world and ask archives to show us the one remaining print of A Man of Straw. But for now, we do the best we can with the internet, with the library, and with Amazon.com. This is how it's going to go. So starting us off, the jury special prize went to the film that I've seen the most amount of times on this list, which is Mon Oncle by Jacques Tati. Tati had been at the festival with Les Vacances de Monsieur Rouleau in 1953, Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, which, when released in the States, was a huge hit. Monsieur Hulot is the character that he plays in a lot of his films. He's sort of like the middle ground between Charlie Chaplin and Mr. Bean.
Or Mr. Magoo.
Yeah, and also actually his assistant on Mon Oncle was Pierre Ete, who also did a very, very, very funny, mostly silent character in his comedies that I love. And I only discovered him a few years ago. I think he's going to be in competition, so I look forward to watching some of them again. His films are great.
And what's the name?
Pierre Ete, Etaix. He won an Oscar for a short film that he did, but his features are great. Anyway, so Monsieur Hulot is hugely popular. And then with Mon Oncle, it's even more popular. As I said, he won an Oscar for Best Foreign Film. And then, as many people know, he didn't make another film until Playtime, which is 9 years later, which was this incredible undertaking where he basically rebuilt the city of Paris in the studios in billions of dollars. I mean, I think he got his sister to invest her inheritance in it. And then it came out. American distributors were not interested in it because Monsieur Hulot is in it, but he's hardly in it. It's a very conceptual film. I think it's fascinating. Yeah, yes, it's fascinating. It's incredible what he pulls off image-wise. But I can also see why people didn't think it was going to be commercial enough. On top of which, the fandom that made Monsieur Hulot popular in the 50s, in the sort of post-war UNICEF 50s, is not the same landscape in the late 60s where everyone's going to see Blow Up, His
Right.
gentle style of humor is just no longer what people are craving. Certainly not to the tune of the amount of money he would have needed for that film to turn a profit. And given that it didn't get released in the States, that kills all of its chances of turning a profit. So it destroyed his career. He made two very small films after that, one of them for television. He never got over it. And then more recently, Sylvain Chomet made a animated film of one of his unproduced scripts, The Illusionist, in 2010.
Oh, is that any good? I never watched it.
It's very charming.
Okay. That's a bummer what you say about Playtime because it is a movie also of the 60s. It's not repeating his beats from his other Hulo movies.
And true, and I love it, even though I do get why it's not like a perfect. It's a flawed film, but its flaws kind of are what partly what make it fascinating. I think it's
Yeah,
really cool. Anyway, Playtime is not in competition, but it is. You can't talk about Jacques Tati without talking about that very momentous aspect to his career.
of
While
course.
as in Mon Oncle, we're looking at him at the absolute apex of success, the height of his popularity and economic success. And this film was a hit. It was beloved by everyone. It's a film that I have definitely seen enough times. I think it's really. I think some aspects of it are still really funny. The kids whistling so that people bump into lampposts still makes me laugh. Especially the one kid who goes down and wipes the street to make the woman cross the street. I find that really funny. But a lot of it is it's just very kind of twee humor about our fears of technology and analog versus digital world and whatever. It's incredibly beautiful though.
Undeniably beautiful and tactile. I really feel like I can reach into the screen and touch everything,
Yeah,
which I cannot say about his descendants. And you know who I'm talking about.
right. Yeah.
And I should say up front, I like whimsy. I have been to two Alice Rohrwalkers with you and enjoyed myself.
Right.
So I really felt stuck on this one and wondered why, like, just why am I not enjoying this? And ultimately, where I arrived is it's fine. I just think it's a short film that overstayed its welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I'm in a crowded house with Greek women. I apologize for the noise you all hear in the background. There's not much I can do about it. You could always donate money and help us buy a studio. All
Where we don't
right.
hear smashing plates.
Yeah. Oh, funny. All right. The jury prize went to two films we did not see: Goha by Jacques Baratier and Visage de Bronze by Bernard Tessin. I could not find these films. Best Actor is wonderful this year because it's clearly the jury saying, please jizz on my face. Who even knew you were acting? It's Paul Newman at his smoking hottest in The Long Hot
Smoking.
Summer. I watched this movie with a straight friend and we made out after because it made me so horny watching him in his undershirt and shirtless that I was like, dude, there's no one for miles. You're just going to have to do this. And we had a great time. We had also polished off a bottle of Red Label. But yeah, it was pretty great.
Bill, that's not the best part of that story that you told me. You and that straight friend then didn't talk for a while.
12 years. Yeah, we're friends again. It was a great night, and he loves Paul Newman even more than I do, so it was all part of a wonderful experience. So Paul Newman won Best Actor for The Long Hot Summer by Martin Ritt. Martin Ritt was completely incapable of making a bad movie, even though this is not one of my favorites of his.
Yeah,
It's an adaptation of three William Faulkner works: a novella called Spotted Horses, a short story called Barn Burning, a novel called The Hamlet. That they sort of combine into basically just watching people rub ice cubes all over themselves in the deep hot South. And this is Paul Newman also the year that he breaks out. He was in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof this year and earned his first Oscar nomination. So he had had his first major lead role in Somebody Up There Likes Me 2 years before this, but this is the year that he is an absolute undeniable movie star. There's just no turning back. And obviously a red hot sex symbol because he looks like the statue of the David come to life.
truly.
And if you want to give him this award for holding such pure charisma, that's fine. I mean, I don't know who else that I really need to give it to at this festival of the ones that I've seen. So,
He's also just really good. Like he's not just smoking hot.
yeah,
He is holding us in his grasp. He is.
absolutely. And this is that decade of like this method acting becoming popular and all these young hot men who are quote unquote forcing us to take them seriously because of all the training and the actor studio stuff and whatever. But it's like, yeah, it also helps that you are like a vision in human form.
Mhm.
I enjoyed this movie watching it again. It has the most ridiculous performance by Orson Welles, who looks like when you see a crazy lady on the bus. Those are the same eyebrows he's got going on in this film.
Yep,
And we're supposed to believe that like New York Italian Anthony Franciosa, who I also think is very handsome,
truly.
is his son. He's like, "Pa, what are you talking about?" And it's like the deep hot South. It's
You're
really funny.
tearing me apart.
Yeah. And then Joanne Woodward's entire role is just her being proud of the fact that she can rock a tight bun and she doesn't give in to her sexual urges. That's the entire plot. Whilst Lee Remick is delightful as the girl who can't get enough.
And the character who is always accompanied by body horns music.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is also a movie trying to cash in on the popularity of Tennessee Williams movies because there'd been a few of them this decade. So, yeah.
I did enjoy this. I did think for the first half I was going to love it, that it was going to
Hmm.
be a 5-star experience. I can tell in the last act that some Catholic consultant to the studio has gotten their hands
Sure.
on the script
Yeah, of
because they
course.
really they take shortcuts to redeem Orson Welles' character.
That's right. Yeah.
And there are great examples of movies dealing with these themes and subject matter in this decade, like Written on the Wind, even Picnic. And I think have a bit more guts than this ends up having in the last act. But I did still enjoy watching it, and I do recommend it because it needs to. People need to be reminded what a star is.
Without a doubt. And I love him. He's one of the few real life couples that also crackle on screen. He and Joanne Woodward were always great when they were together on screen. And there's a lot of real life couples where that doesn't happen. One of the other few that I can think of where it also works is Melanie Griffith and Don Johnson were always super hot together on screen.
Hmm.
I wonder what was going on with Orson Welles in this movie, though, because I don't know if you notice, he is ADR'd every time he speaks. It's all post dubbed.
Well, he's doing the Tom Hardy, what we now identify as the Tom Hardy school of acting, which is be indecipherable.
Yeah, I wondered about that. If his like the initial, if the accent he was using was hard to understand, or if he was just not well. I mean, Orson Welles was a complicated man.
This is the same year as Touch of Evil, and he's doing a similar affectation.
Yeah, yeah. For Best Actress, there is a special mention given to the star of our Palme d'Or winner, but we will talk about her later, and it's a very deserved special mention. But I am on board for the Best Actress prize being a group prize given to the women of an Ingmar Bergman movie I had never seen before called Brink of Life, and the award went to Bibi Andersson, Eva Dahlbeck, and Ingrid Thulin, who are familiar in his stable. The fourth, Barbro Hjort af Urnas, I don't know. I've probably seen her in other movies of his, and I just didn't know her by name.
Which one
But
is the doctor who's also the doctor in Persona?
is she the Doctor in Persona? Because I believe that that's who they're naming here is the Doctor.
Okay, then that's who it is, I
Yeah.
think.
Okay. Ava Dalbeck, I don't know what happened to her. I don't. She's in a lot of his '50s movies. I don't see her in his films later on. But Bibi Andersson continues to work with him for a long time, as does Ingrid Thulin, who she's probably my favorite of all of Bergman's women. I think she's
Really?
incredible. Yeah, I think she's incredible. She's also great in Visconti's The Damned. This is a really good movie. It also won him the Best Director prize, and
Deserved.
it's all set in a maternity hospital where we're basically in the problem ward. This woman is brought in after a miscarriage, and she's in a room with a woman who is very excited about having her baby, but you get the impression already from the beginning that there's concern to make sure that things go okay. And then there's also, which is Ava Dalbeck, and then there's Bibi Andersson, who is there because she tried to abort a child she was going to have out of wedlock, or she did abort it. No, she's still pregnant. Spoiler alert.
She tried to abort it. She made efforts. She tried doing all the tricks, like jump down
Right.
the stairs, all that kind of
That's
stuff.
right. Yeah. And so of course she's very unhappy about the fact that she's still pregnant. And what I love about this movie, Liv Ullmann is always wonderful to listen to talk about Bergman because she's very honest about him and also very loving. She says, he was my best friend, so I can tell you, the man was a chauvinist. I never saw him wash his own dish or clean his own clothes in his entire life. And yet he wrote women so beautifully and with such sympathy. And I think it's particularly poignant in this film, his sympathy for What society is always telling women is their greatest achievement and their greatest fulfillment is having a baby.
Hmm.
uh, and that we see that actually the road to that is it's rocky, it's difficult. You and I know plenty of people who have had trouble with this aspect of life, and thankfully we're a lot more open about talking about it,
Hmm.
about the our women we know who've gone through months of IVF and or just struggling to have a baby or have lost children or whatever, all the things that are really quite gory. And I found myself thinking about the fact that he's probably inspired by the fact that we also have a lot of rhetorical phrases we use around childbirth to ignore the gory details, including when it's successful and it's a symphony of blood and shit.
Hmm.
Your blessed event and your happy day and God's gift and all the
Life is
things that we say.
precious.
Right? Yeah.
An obstetrician once said to me when I asked how she likes delivering babies. Sorry, not an obstetrician, a family physician who does obstetrics. And she
Yeah.
said, I know life is precious, but it's not that special.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like it is a miracle, but at the same time, it's happening every 5 seconds. So So I appreciate that he finds the human experience beneath the rhetorical nonsense in this film. And I love Ingrid Tullin's performance. I love the sort of grace that she finds by the end of this film.
I think it's a fantastic movie. I wondered for a moment if it is Palme d'Or deserving because it is high tier Bergman for me.
Yeah,
But I still think I would rather if he ever had a Palme d'Or, I think I would pick something from the mid '60s.
yeah.
But what I'll say for this movie is it is the one movie on this list the most that is predicting the next decade.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah,
And I really appreciate when Bergman does minimalism because for a moment you ask yourself, am I watching a play on screen? Because he has a background in theater.
yes.
And it's exciting that the answer is no. This is very cinematic. He is fully in control and confident to not move the camera, let the actors be in the center of the frame and acting, and then every once in a while lets you see the viscera of what they're experiencing, and you don't experience that from the back row of a theater.
And it is minimal for him too. I feel like the characters all cut to the bone in this movie, and in the '60s he gets deeper into having actors really pour over their anguish a lot
Mhm.
more. I find Through a Dark Glass Darkly kind of boring. I find Winter Light kind of boring, even though it's brilliant. So I appreciated that in this film, especially in the '50s, his movies are never longer than they need to be.
No, he never. That talking of people who overstay their welcome, that is never something I experienced with Bergman.
Yeah,
Not even with Fanny and Alexander, honestly, which I love as an epic.
yeah. I still haven't figured that movie out. This is Bergman's fourth time at the festival. He would be here one more time for The Virgin Spring, which we already talked about. And as we mentioned before, famously, he never won the Palme d'Or. Best screenplay went to another film we couldn't find, Mauro Bolognini's Young Husbands, Giovanni Mariti. Hopefully, we'll watch another one of his films that we have here because he was in competition a total of 5 times.
Wow.
On to the non award winners. First off, we have Richard Brooks, one of Hollywood's finest auteurs, I would say. In a few years after this, he would make Elmer Gantry, for which he would win an Oscar for Best Screenplay. The same year as, well, The Brothers Karamazov, I believe, it came out in '58 in the States too.
Pause for a moment. The movie Bill's talking about is The Brothers Karamazov.
Thank you, Greg. So yes, he's in competition this year with the Brothers Karamazov. The same year, The Cat in a Hot Tin Roof also came out, which he directed. He also later made a movie called The Professionals, which I really like. It's a western with Burt Lancaster that he was nominated for Best Director for, and nominated again for In Cold Blood, the adaptation of the Truman Capote film. And in the '70s, made a really fun caper called Dollars with Warren Beatty and Goldie Hawn that I also really like. Anyway, he's adapting the unadaptable, in this case, Dostoevsky's incredibly. Is it Dostoevsky?
It is Dostoevsky.
Suddenly, my mind just froze. Dostoevsky's incredibly long novel. I read the whole thing. I don't remember a single thing. Dostoevsky, of course, was not so much interested in telling stories as he was as sort of pinning down the nature of morality, spirituality, human emotion, always very philosophical in nature in the way he explored the narratives that he wrote. You can't really make all that into a movie. So, of course, the film adaptation focuses on the plot while still having a sense of Dostoevsky's thoughtful nature, I would say. I like this movie. I don't love it. I enjoyed it much more than I thought I would, given that I thought that there's just no way you can make a film out of that book. It's got a great cast, including an Oscar-nominated performance by Lee J. Cobb.
Great performance.
Yeah, he was always great. Yul Brynner in the lead.
Is he daddy?
Is Yul Brynner a daddy? Is that what you asked?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, he'll choke you.
For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Okay. Just want to make sure that I'm not off in the deep end on this one.
yeah. And then after, he will order perfectly in French at the very nice restaurant he takes you to, and won't even let you look at the prices. Yeah.
Amazing.
Have you ever seen his nudes?
No, but that we're doing that after this pod. Actually, I can do it during the pod.
No, don't do it. You'll be too distracted. I'm not kidding.
Okay. Okay.
Claire Bloom is in this film. Maria Schell as Grushenka, in the role that Marilyn Monroe wanted to play, and was laughed at for thinking she could. She could have done it, but she probably would have refused to not wear her usual glamour makeup, but she could have done it.
What should I know Claire Bloom the best for? Because this was my intro.
Daylight, starring Sylvester Stallone.
Shut the fuck up.
She is in that. She's in Woody Allen's Crimes and Misdemeanors in a small role. She was much better known as a stage actress. She had a good film career, but not one that's lasted
Hmm.
in our minds the way, because she never had that role. She was never nominated for an Oscar. She was in The Spy Who Came in from the Cold with Richard Burton. She's really good in that.
Oh, cool.
She's probably most famous for The Haunting with
Oh,
Julie
yes.
Harris, the Robert Wise film.
Does she play the Daquin one that
Yes.
Catherine
Yeah.
Zeta-Jones plays later?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Look at
Yeah.
me using all these. I'm allowed. I'm in the community.
Yeah.
But
Who cares? Cancel us. See if we care. Richard Basehart is in this film. William Shatner's in this film. Anyway, my point is, I like this film. I think it's enjoyable.
it's an essential. I wouldn't tell anybody to go to their way to watch it unless they're completing a filmography or they care about the source novel.
Yeah.
But I asked about Claire Bloom because her performance really gave me a jolt.
Oh yeah. Yeah. She was great. She did a lot of Shakespeare on stage. She's in Laurence Olivier's adaptation of Richard III as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, this film does. I would say because I was rereading my review of it as well, and I had written that there is a determination on Richard Brooks's part to never turn this into a romance novel, as would be the temptation when making a Hollywood adaptation of a famous novel. And because he sticks to that so well, it ends up being a bit of a chore to get to the end.
Yeah, because romances move things along.
Yeah,
They're easy. They're easy they go down easy. And I did think the movie needed some more explaining when it got to the wily epileptic brother.
sure. Yeah, well, that's because it's a 900-page novel being whittled down to a mere 2.5 hours.
I figured that was the reason.
Yeah. We did not see La Caleta Olvidada by Bruno Gebel or Ciulinii Bărăganului by Louis Daquin. I don't know what that movie is.
We
Um,
did watch.
but we did watch Desire Under the Elms by Delbert. Mann. I had seen this like 30 years ago. I never wanted to watch it again, but I did, because that's what I do for you people. And it turns out I was right, because I have rewatched some movies for this show and been like, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought, as I remembered. Whereas this movie was just as dreary and as dull. It is Delbert Mann adapting a Eugene O'Neill play from the 20s, I want to say, from the 30s. Eugene O'Neill was dead by the time this movie was made. It stars our delicious King Twink, Anthony Perkins, and his wonderful tits, and Sophia
Mm-hmm.
Loren and her even more wonderful tits, in a
And
very
Burl
early...
Ives and his less appealing tits.
Burl Ives. Burl Ives was the one who was criticized the most when this movie came out, because that character is supposed to be sort of like a hardened... He's supposed to be the dad in the Iron Claw,
Yeah.
and Burl Ives plays him like jolly old Saint Nick, which is interesting because Burl Ives had a great year. Otherwise, he was in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and he's great in that, and he won an Oscar for The Big Country this year. But this particular role is a bad fit for him. I would say it's also a bad fit for Sophia Loren. She hasn't quite mastered dialogue in English yet,
Mm-hmm.
and they also make the fact that they point out that the character is from Italy, that's invented for the film. That's not the case with the original character in the play. This movie is made because, as I mentioned earlier, Tennessee Williams movies are really popular in the 50s as a result of Streetcar Named Desire. So
Hmm.
turning great American theater into serious films for serious people is good for money making, and so this film comes about. But it's just not it's an interesting play. It's not an interesting film. I find it again really dowdy.
Yeah, it's a frumpy movie, and it's also unconvincing in its casting choices and in its adaptation. And I can say that without having read the source, because the source could be bad for all I know. But I'm supposed to be persuaded that Perkins is this quickly falling in love with his new stepmom. I don't buy it. I also don't buy that he does farm work at all because he's so like Death in Venice Twinkie.
He's very clean. Yeah,
He's very clean. Like he should have some callus. You know what I mean? Like he should
yeah.
look somewhat like his brothers. Yeah, and then the dead baby is a mere flashpoint. Spoiler alert: there's a dead baby. You're not going to watch it. We don't want you to.
Yes, because the dead baby is because Eugene O'Neill was very interested in adapting, finding ways to put ancient Greek theater into a
Hmm.
more modern American setting. So you have elements of Phaedra in this particular play. Morning Becomes Electra is another play of his. It's also interesting because Anthony Perkins actually a few years later made a film version of Phaedra with Melina Mercouri, set in modern times. I don't know. There is something that just never quite work out in the adaptation of this film, in part because you can feel the studio executives are trying to turn high-minded American theater into something that they can sell to young people.
Yeah, it's unaffecting, and this is not to generalize about theater adaptations in the 50s and into the early 60s, because a lot of them, even when they don't work, have one or two solid performances and some camp to them.
Yeah,
I already mentioned Picnic. I think watching Shirley Booth and Come Back Little Sheba should be its own like drag night in Toronto. This one, it's unfortunate because there's so much about it that should be unhinged, but it just feels uh, leaden.
I also never liked Sophia Loren in the 50s nearly as much as I love her in the 60s. Like after Two Women, she really unlocks a new level of power, and the image of her in 60s movies like Marriage Italian Style or Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow, that's just her at the height of her powers.
Agreed.
We did not watch The Flute and the Arrow by Arne Sucksdorff or The Girl in the River, L'eau vive by François Villiers, or Iron Flower by Janusz Hershko, or Journey Beyond Three Seas by Kwaya Ahmad Abbas and Vasily Pronin, or A Man of Straw by Pietro Germi. But we did watch a Greek film that I had seen many years earlier and was happy to catch up with, A Matter of Dignity, or To Telefteo Psema, which means the final lie, the ultimate lie, by Michael Cacoyannis. Cacoyannis would become much more famous in the 60s when his Zorba the Greek wins 3 Oscars. He also directed one of what is probably my favorite Greek film of all time, which is Iphigenia, or Iphigenia in 1977, which we will talk about. I have it on Blu-ray in case we can't find it. It's amazing. It was also Greece's last Best Foreign Film nomination until Dogtooth.
We're gonna talk about this guy quite a bit. He's been here 7 times.
Yes, and I've seen 4 of these. His Electra is also really good,
Hmm.
and so Matter of Dignity is one of 2 movies or 3 movies, excuse me, that he made with uh, the Greek theatrical sensation Eli Lambetti. Greek people all know who Eli Lambetti is, and I don't know that she ever broke out internationally because she didn't make a lot of films. She starred on the Athenian stage many times over many years. My great aunt used to talk about seeing her in just about everything she ever did. She worked up until the end of her unfortunately short life. She died of breast cancer in the early 80s. I think she was only in her mid 50s. She did the Greek version of Children of a Lesser God when that play premiered, and I think that was one of her last major roles. But you see in this film that even though she's clearly a stage actress, that there is possibility for a kind of Audrey Hepburn career with her. She has that kind of prettiness, and she's got a lot of charisma. And it's this interesting, if not fascinating, story about the daughter of a rich family who are presenting as wealthy. They're actually in a lot of financial trouble and having trouble keeping up with things. I don't know why you throw a party if you don't have any money, but they do.
It's called Keeping Up with the Joneses.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're begging the local grocers to extend their credit and all that stuff. And she has the opportunity to marry a very wealthy man who is very boring, but she also falls in love with a very handsome importer who's not as wealthy. And her childhood best friend, played by future Greek heartthrob Dimitris Mikhail, who was also one of the sailors in Never on Sunday. This is like his first movie. He becomes like Ryan Gosling in Greece in like the 1960s.
I believe it.
Yeah. And also because he married Aliki Vuyuklaki, who was sort of the Brigitte Bardot of Greek cinema, and the two of them made Mickey and Judy musicals for 2 decades after that, even after they got divorced. Anyway, so he's also in love with her, but things work out to tragedy, but at the same time also work involving her maid, but they also work out to her finding her genuine dignity instead
Hmm.
of her social dignity. I enjoy this film. She also made The Girl in Black with Cacoyannis, which I think is a better movie. I find that this movie is well made, but I don't. I think that the message would come across a lot more if all the supporting characters weren't all two-dimensional stereotypes of cold bourgeois or warm poor people or whatever.
You're probably right about that, though I will say the centerpiece of this homework endeavor we did for this pod was the performance of Ea Lambetti. When I started
Ellie,
to watch this,
yeah,
Ellie,
Ellie, yeah,
Ellie,
yeah.
I misheard you.
That's
Uh,
right.
as as soon as the movie started, I thought I just zoomed in on her. It's a real like for me, it was a revelation of a performer.
Yeah,
And I will agree with you. This is quite trod territory. We see this a lot in noir and melodrama, and we see it in Edith Wharton novels. The undoing of a high society type, someone who continues to dig their own grave until something really cataclysmic happens.
right.
I think it is pulled off because even if the characters are drawn thin, they're performed richly.
Yeah.
I think the actress playing her mother is fantastic.
Yeah, Greek films, particularly of this era, everyone who's in them has come from the Greek stage, and everyone who's on the Greek stage has come from years of training. And so the performances are always great in old Greek movies, even when the movie's not great.
Everyone in this movie is making me feel class anxiety, and I think that's what works about the movie.
Yeah.
And then, as an outsider, I just find it really it brings narrative and visual interest to bring all of these familiar themes to the docks and the sailboats. I enjoyed that.
Absolutely. And I love the ending of this movie. I think it's really great. I think it's really powerful.
It is, although
Yeah.
it is quite moralistic.
Sure, yeah. But this is also a very common concern in Greek cinema after the war. The war ends, there's a civil war, it's a lot of political turmoil pulling between right and left. Greece has military coups in its future. So there are a lot of films where it's like soulless rich people and hardy and poor people with like genuine values.
Hmm.
Something you might not know watching this film, the rich people always have either foreign or fancy names. Her
Mm,
name in this movie, what is it? It's Chloe. Her name is
mm,
Chloe, and her mom is Roxani,
right.
um, which like aren't really Greek. They are Greek names, but they're not really Greek names. The poor people in Greek movies always have very traditional names, like baptismal names,
Yeah.
Panayota, Dimitra, all the people that here in Canada because they all came from small villages. So that's also a common trope in old Greek movies. And then just this sort of push and pull between, is it worth being rich if it means you're not a good person? Or should we, it's a kind of populist message that is not unique to Greece.
That shows up later in the Mexican movie Y tu Mama Tambien.
Sure.
The fact that the poor one is named Julio, but the richer
Yeah.
one is named Tenoch, which is a less
Tenoch.
common name.
Yeah, that's right.
Uh, I think it's cool that the four actresses in Brink of Life won. If they had given it to Lambetti, I thought that would have been cool. I do want to ask you: is there something? Is there anything else happening in the cultural, in the culture socioeconomically that explains this movie?
Yes, because this is also the time when everyone outside of Athens is moving to Athens to find work. Greece
Mm,
doesn't have the economic boom that Italy had after the war. What little there was in the capital city. So all of these, when I go there and I see all of these apartment, like all of Athens is apartment buildings, there's very, very few houses. And it's because they tore all of them down to build all of these apartment buildings because of the mass migration of people to the capital city in the 50s and 60s. And I think that there's an anxiety to that that is also happening in this film. One thing I love about Athenians, though, is that even the poor people don't live in small apartments. They're all spacious and, yeah.
But let me guess, all of those apartment buildings are now projects?
No, not at all. One of the things that I know differentiates them is the newer ones have earthquake proofing in their foundations, which the older ones don't.
Hmm.
Yeah, and there's always an earthquake every summer when I go.
I do recommend this movie.
Yeah, yeah. We also have Arne Skuen's Nine Lives, Ni Liv from Norway. This is an Oscar nominee for Best Foreign Language Film and was recently voted the greatest Norwegian film of all time. I think that has a lot to do with the country's pride over the true story that it represents, which is the story of a resistance fighter who survives an attack on his boat and finds himself crossing the frozen fjords of the northern Scandinavian landscape to say he's trying to get to neutral Sweden, and along the way is helped by the Norwegians he encounters who risk their lives to help him. For a 50s movie, this movie is pretty gory about what it, the whole description of like his feet and his body parts that are all like being destroyed by this extreme cold. You don't see anything, but
He
that's
gets
a lot more.
gangrene.
Yeah, there's a lot more description of it than you would expect from a movie of this era. It's well acted, it's competently made. I don't regret watching it, and I also don't love it.
No, I don't love it, but I think I would like it even more if it got the Kino Lorber treatment,
Sure.
because I was getting flashbacks of our 1975 episode while I tried to decipher all of the snow in on the YouTube version.
Yeah, I have to start prioritizing downloading these over watching them on YouTube because it's just always it's far too compromising an experience, especially because you're watching them on your projector, right?
I am, although my projector is quite good.
Yeah,
I've
but
had,
it's still I find like the bigger you make the image, the more it reveals the flaws,
it's
and some of
probably
these
true.
YouTube movies are headache inducing to watch.
It is worth noting, though, that this movie was voted in 1991 as the greatest Norwegian movie by its population.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but again, I have a feeling that has a lot to do more with legacy than with them actually like priority. I don't know how many movies have Norwegians made anyway. We have Orders to Kill by Anthony Asquith. I love Anthony Asquith's films. He's made so many British movies that I love. He is the great uncle of Helena Bonham Carter and the son or grandson of British Prime Minister H. Asquith. So he's in good company. He was apparently secretly a homosexual who drank himself to death, which is so hot.
I would never be able to tell that from Pygmalion.
Yeah. He made so many movies that I love, and yet I had never heard of this film before we got down to this festival. He had been in the festival for the Browning version in 51, which is a great movie based on a Terrence Rattigan play. But here he makes a spy thriller that I actually really enjoyed. He's a British. He's a British soldier serving in the States, is he?
Yeah,
Or he's an American serving in the British Army. I watched it a week ago and I don't remember this. No, he's British. Anyway, he is sent into, because he speaks French, he is sent into occupied France to assassinate somebody that the resistance believes might be a double agent. They don't know for sure, but they have made the call and he has been hired to kill him. And once he meets his mark, he starts to feel nervous about killing him because he thinks he might be innocent, but it's really just that he's also afraid to pull off this job. It's a very interesting moral conundrum that happens. It has a very good performance by Irene Worth as his contact in Paris, who won a BAFTA for her performance. She didn't make a lot of movies, but she was a very famous stage actress who also was in the inaugural season of the Stratford Festival in Ontario way back in the 50s with Alec Guinness.
hmm.
And much later after that, was exceptional in Neil Simon's Lost in Yonkers in the film version, and I believe on stage. She's great in this movie, but yeah, I really like this film. It's got style. It's not my favorite of his, but also is a movie that I should say took a while to get cooking for me. But once it was on, I was really into it.
Yeah. It encourages me to watch more Anthony Asquith movies
Hmm.
because it is full of style. It reminds me that at its peak, British noir is almost better than US noir, especially because of its daring to be shot in real locations.
Yep.
The rain scenes in this are really good. The music is fantastic. So much of it is working for me, but it's all so importantly hinged on its lead character, and I just don't believe, and it might be because of this actor, that this twerp would be entrusted by a major to carry out this severe of a mission.
Yeah, you feel like they would hire somebody who has killed like a million people. This idea that he's the only person that speaks French, which is actually a pretty common thing for a educated British person, that didn't quite wash. This movie reminded me of the it's like as a forerunner of that Robert Zemeckis movie Allied with Brad Pitt and Marion Cotillard. Like the style is there, everything's right, but it doesn't quite come off.
It reminded me of Kieslowski's short film about killing. This guy just
Oh,
cannot kill someone effectively.
yeah, like just do it already.
Yeah.
But it was interesting in terms of its examining the sort of the morality of killing in a time when we've decided to put usual morals aside, right? That in war we do the thing that we're not supposed to do, and we've decided it's okay. And I find that as an examination of that, it is pretty interesting. I also didn't love the lead guy. I can't remember his name. He's also in a really good supporting performance in Sapphire, which is a late 50s British thriller that I've watched like three times and can't get enough of. It's so good. But yeah, and after this, Anthony Asquith would make the Richard Burton Elizabeth Taylor melodrama The VIPs, which I love. Not great film, but I love it.
Yeah, there's a category of leading man in this decade that I could describe as howdy doody.
Without a doubt. We have the great Satyajit Ray with the Philosopher's Stone. This is Lesser Ray. This is one of his more lighthearted conceptual films that I enjoyed. I'd seen it before. I'm pretty sure I saw it at the Lightbox when they did a whole slew of his movies. And it's a charming sort of careful what you wish for morality tale about a man who finds an enchanted stone that can turn iron into gold, which then ruins his life. I love Ray. He's another one who gets way richer in the '60s. Other than the Apu trilogy, his '60s stuff is where he becomes the real master of subtle human character exploration. But it's never a waste of time to watch one of his films.
Yeah, and this movie reminded me that his leg up on the neorealists is that he always directed actors better.
Yes, absolutely. He'll be back with. He was here for Pather Panchali in 1956, which is his first film and up there with my favorites of his.
Hmm.
He'll be back for Devi, the Goddess, which is another one of his, like, it's good, it's cute. And then he's actually in the festival for The Home in the World in '84, which is up there with the greatest movies ever made. So, yeah. We did not watch Rosaura at 10 o'clock by Mario Sofici, but I watched all three CC movies by Ernst Marischka. And as I told you, I asked my mom, have you ever seen the CC movies with Romy Schneider? And she said, are you kidding? Of course. Those are like the first movies I ever saw. In my mom's generation, if you were European, you saw these movies. They were my Big Fat Greek Wedding of their time. Everyone saw the CC movies. They are, of course, a quote unquote biographical examination of the early years of the reign of Empress Elizabeth of the Austro Hungarian Empire. Highly fictionalized. Film it like an MGM musical and give it characters with the same level of depth. Ignore the fact that she became more politically controversial later on and was murdered, because at this point in time, she has been rehabilitated as this untouchable uh, Madonna, in the Catholic sense, figure. The heroine of this part of the world. These movies are played at Christmas every year in Germany and Austria, and the second one played at Cannes in '57, but I hadn't had time to watch it for that. So for this one, I know you didn't end up having time to watch more than the third one. I watched all three. It's basically one movie split into three. Like you don't need to watch all three to get what's going on because not much happens in them, and it's
No.
just it's just all about close-ups of Romy Schneider smiling, who is really good. I mean, she's got a lot of charisma, a lot of charm. Her mother's in this movie. She's also really good. The actors are all really good. It looks more beautiful. Like the whole thing looks like a shiny Christmas package. But there's just nothing to it. And it doesn't
Hmm.
help that like she has this great romance with a man who looks like Miss Hathaway from the Beverly Hillbillies, who everyone keeps talking about how handsome he is. Anyway,
I appreciate that in the post-war years, it's all about getting as much money on the screen as possible, and
yes.
biopics of royals are easy vehicles for audiences to marvel at the splendor of the one percenters.
Yeah,
Uh, it's like, especially in color, it offers to enjoy this all up close,
absolutely. Yeah.
and just like a train arriving at a station in a Lumiere Brothers movie, it's something that
Yeah.
we just don't appreciate in 2024.
Yeah.
How important it is to see all this dazzle in color up
Yeah.
close.
Yeah.
But like you said, this isn't even a story. I think 10% of it is maneuvers of power in the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Yeah, all three of them are basically about the one thing she did that changed things, because she was so beloved that she made him popular in all of the subjugated countries of the empire that hated him,
Hmm.
particularly putting down rebellions, according to these films, putting down rebellions in Hungary because she was so charming. They just couldn't help but be happy to be oppressed thanks to having met her. Um,
But
and that
then,
it's something that Romy Schneider does pull off. I do truly do believe that everywhere she goes, everyone falls in love with her, even though I want her to cut that fucking hair. And I can see why these movies made her a huge star, and I can also see why she felt trapped by them because it's what everyone wanted her to do after that, and she wanted to do more. And so she often spoke about these movies in a very negative context because of that. Even though she did play Cece one more time in the 70s for Lucchino Visconti in Ludwig, which she did because she loved him. But
but the second half of this movie is her walking off consumption around ancient ruins,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
finally being told, "Oh, you don't have tuberculosis anymore."
Yeah. Well, because the real story is that we don't really know if she ever had anything because it is believed that she was a hypochondriac who
Mm.
was actually just reacting to stress. So
Well,
yeah,
that's cinematic.
I read up on her on Wikipedia. There's also that movie from a few years ago, 2 years ago, Corsage with Vicky Creeps playing her.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's interesting that she continues to be a figure of fantasy and imagination because in that film, everything that happens in that film is made up and actually in many ways contradicts the real Elizabeth's personality and actions and death. So it's like it's interesting to me that she's always she is this kind of and that film is meant to be a sort of like a sort of feminist re-envisioning of her, but it's like, but then why did you make everything up? I don't know, I never understood what the point of that film was.
I regrettably paid money to see it in theater.
No, okay, it's also a beautiful film.
It is, but
Yeah,
it's it is tired.
yeah, even though I love Vicky Creeps, but yeah.
Me too.
And I did feel bad for her that she and her director had like two major scandals on their hand because of people involved in that film while promoting this like feminist retelling of the story of Empress Elizabeth. Meanwhile, one of her cast members is arrested for child pornography, and then I think her DP or somebody was arrested for he was accused of sexual assault. So that did not
Yeesh.
that made the press tour very tense. Let's just say that. So that is Cece. And yeah, what else is there to say about that?
Oh, but Bill, no. Before we move on, we have to
Oh,
talk
the
about the
sausages. Yeah,
cuisine, which I
yeah.
have one of. I brought one of
The
them here. Look, here it is.
that looks. I'm not even going to tell our listeners what you just pulled up. That you just have at the ready. Let me point out. No, the movie opens with a scene. It is interesting because she was Bavarian. Elizabeth was Bavarian. She was not Austrian, and she was the daughter of a Bavarian duke and a princess. Her cousin was King Ludwig of Bavaria, not at the time when she was this young, and she married her first cousin, right? Because the emperor's mother was her mother's sister. Anyway, so there's a lot of pushing of this her as this like country girl, basically, which is how Bavarians are viewed in movies made from anywhere outside of that part of Germany, or yeah, and so she lives on like it looks like a scene from Heidi. She lives on a mountaintop and everyone's happy. Her mother has like 30,000 kids that are all getting along, and it's like, everyone come in, we're going to eat sausages. And I remember thinking, oh, I love a German sausage, and I don't even mean that as a colloquialism. I like an actual German sausage. And they go in, they sit down, and they pull out these giant gray things that look like eels.
It's that Kids in the Hall sketch.
And I know someone's going to say, oh, that's what a real, proper, whatever bratwurst sausage. I don't care. It's disgusting and it
Yeah.
traumatized me, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since.
It looked like tentacle porn.
It totally looked like tentacle porn. So that's the last one we can talk about. The last 4 films I was not able to source: Snow Country by Shiro Toyoda, the Spessart in Das Wirtshaus im Spessart by Kurt Hoffmann, Suburban Romance by Zbigniew Brinic, or Vengeance, La Venganza by Juan Antonio Bardem. Those are the last 4 films. Juan Antonio Bardem is the uncle of Javier Bardem, and his most famous film is Death of a Cyclist, which I have yet to see. Greg, what are we giving the damned door to? What is our worst in show?
Well, first, let's just pat ourselves on the back that we don't have so many competitors for it this year. I think we
Yeah,
really
we
have
also
a
don't have a
few.
lot of frontrunners for it either. Yeah, like I found that they're all kind of like middle of the road, except I do feel pretty confident in my choice.
For me, I could swing in either direction of 2 movies depending on the day, but I'm going to give it to the movie with less plot, and that's Cece.
Oh yeah, no, mine is definitely Desire Under the Elms. That
That would be
is,
my other choice.
yeah, because CC is dumb, but I didn't feel tortured sitting through it.
Yeah, in Desire to the Elves, at least has Burl Ives thrashing about like he's in Animal House.
Yeah. On to our poem.
Я хочу спросить, когда вчить? Ну? Нет, нет, не могу, не могу. Бил, я на заводе за него. Я поставлю.
Yeah, so our Palme d'Or winner is the first Soviet film to win the Palme, The Cranes Are Flying by Mikhail Kalatozov. Kalatozov would be back in 1960 with Letter Never Sent. We talked about it in our La Dolce Vita episode. A handsome movie, though kind of thin narratively.
Yes. I didn't like it as much as I like this or I Am Cuba.
And
Soy Cuba.
Soy Cuba has some of the most dazzling photography I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, no,
As does The Cranes Are Flying, I will admit. Yeah.
truly. I mean, this guy's 3 movies that he on which he collaborates with the same DP. Please bring up his name for me. I will look it up. They together make these movies that really make me wonder how the bloody hell did they do that? And I have not thought that about any CGI blockbuster in years. Let me pull up this guy's.
Yes, I should also point out it's not just the first Soviet winner; it's the only Soviet winner
That's true.
that earned the Palme d'Or. And as I learned from the Criterion features, it came about because Claude Lelouch was on a trip to Moscow. He saw this film and he called what's his name, Robert Lebre, the director of the Cannes Film Festival. And he said, "Invite this to the festival. It's going to win the Palme d'Or." And he was right. I thought it was interesting what I read in Michael Gebert's book about how Cannes in the early years was the opposite of what it became later on, which is that Americans only sent their minor celebrities and didn't promote anything at the festival. And the Soviets actually threw very lavish parties. Apparently, the Powell and Pressburger film O Rosalinda lampoons this. And also apparently took the anti-red hostility in the Western world with very good grace,
Hmm.
and that this movie is sort of the result and reward for their presence in the film festival, which is a movie that is seen as sort of a break from the dictates of social realism as was imposed upon Soviet filmmakers, likely because Kalatozov did well with the party. I mean, he's not a subversive in any way. There are ways in which he teases and pokes at the system in
Hmm.
this film, particularly when the 2 girls come over and they start giving that long speech, and the dad's like, "Shut up, let's just eat." But ultimately, I feel like a subversive filmmaker would have had her giving those flowers out angrily at the end. She
Hmm.
actually gives them in the spirit of let's all make our world a better place together with all we've suffered, kind of, like that it's all worth it, basically.
Yeah. Some context for listeners who are not initiated in the topic. This is considered the first masterpiece of post-Stalin Soviet cinema,
Yeah.
and it's considered indicative of the years of the thaw under Khrushchev.
Yeah.
And so while we do have the stylings of social realism under Stalin, it often is in the service of optimistic propaganda. And in this movie, we really are starting to see individualism break through. We're seeing the cult of personality um, basically go away. This is not a movie about pride in the war. It's about what was lost. And this is a country that lost 20 million people.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also not a super complicated plot. A girl and a boy
No.
love each other. They're very sexy together. He's not conventionally handsome, but there is something going on with that guy.
Hmm.
He volunteers to fight. She is left behind. His cousin keeps pressuring her to get with him instead. I find it very interesting that we're not really given much of an explanation as to why she does. Maybe that fascinating sequence with the smashing windows is representing the possibility that he's forced himself on her.
That's what the research says.
But I
It's
also
very
find it
vague.
interesting that she doesn't get pregnant, because that's usually how an old movie would show that happened, is for
Mm.
her to then be in the family way and therefore need to get married. Although if anybody found out that they did it, even if she was forced, they would make her get married anyway. And what's also interesting is that she's never reunited with her great love. He dies in the war, and she doesn't get his letter until many years later. And it's just about the change from her somewhat naive, girlish youth to a Soviet woman who knows how things are and survives. And the style of the film changes. The beginning is all these like beautiful apartments and walking down open streets, all these giant settings around them that are dwarfing them. And
Hmm.
then once we're deep in the war, she's in these like tiny rooms that she's sharing with other families when they go to Siberia, and all of that changes. So, and it opens like a film from the Nouvelle Vague, but it becomes something quite different after that.
It's a really tight, economically told movie. And it's true what you say that it doesn't have a lot of story, so it doesn't need any more screen time. But all the same, I needed to go back and watch it because this movie doesn't ingratiate me or give me comfort with establishing shots.
Yeah.
I'm never given like a master. I am never, in terms of like the mastering gaze, I've never felt like I have access to the geography of this world he's created.
Yeah.
And so what you end up having is a lot of close-ups, a lot of Dutch angles, a lot of shots where characters are separated in terms of light or in terms of angle or blocking, or they're separated by some barrier like bars on a fence, and we never feel steady. And so even early on in the movie, when it's all young love and they're hopeful and they want to get married, we have a feeling of what's to come.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible how much aesthetic pleasure there is in this film. It's almost overloaded with incredible shots and sequences, and yet none of that undermines the power of the story, because I
No.
genuinely care about these kids. I
Hmm.
particularly care about her. She's so compelling and so sympathetic. I fully understand why she was given a special citation for her performance,
Hmm.
because you really do grow to know her and love her. But I actually found myself writing down like all the specific sequences that I really loved, including, because there's a lot of fascinating crane shots and tracking shots in this movie. The shot of her running between the tanks, trying to catch up with him as he's marching off to war, and the biscuits on the ground is
Yes.
fantastic.
Yes.
The long shot of all the people saying goodbye at the assembly grounds, all the various people saying goodbye, and it all happens so spontaneously. Who knows how many times they had to rehearse it, but it all feels supernatural. Excuse me, very natural, I should say. Most famous shot is the tracking shot of her running up the bombed building when her parents are killed,
Oh my
running
god.
up those stairs that are, and everything's on fire, and you're like, I wonder just how good a job the fire wrangler was doing keeping everyone safe, because it looks pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
The wedding fantasy when he is dying
Yeah.
is a really daring move that I really appreciated.
Well, and totally lacking sentimentality. And
Yes.
the moment this guy is dying, he so ingloriously is thinking about the wedding he didn't get to have.
Yeah.
Ooh, so it's so creepy.
And the victory parade at the end. So
Yeah.
all these incredible, and also everyone's named Boris in this movie, which is also something that I noticed.
You can add the sequence where she almost, when she contemplates her own suicide and then ends up rescuing that child from the
Yes.
tank.
And this movie has her rescue a child, but there's no sense of like that typical thing of redeeming a thorny woman through maternity, as we talked about
No,
in T10. There's nothing of that sort at all.
no, it's drudgery, it's duty, it's just it's a lot of what we see in movies like Ballad of a Soldier. To be honest, like
Yeah.
like the obligations that are put upon unsuspecting civilians.
Yeah, there's just a beautiful balance between that realism and romance. I think that a more cynical filmmaker would have had that note that he hid in the squirrel. I think a cynical filmmaker would have had that note disappear forever. It would have just been played around at that party and someone would have thrown it in the fire. The fact that he made sure that it got back to her, I think, is the beating heart of this filmmaker on display.
And an American director would have made that squirrel a conceit like Rosebud.
Yes, that's right. So it's interesting that the end of the war is a sort of hollow victory, but it's not a dark or cynical film.
No, it's not. Yeah, it is a very modernist movie in terms of its individualism, and the photographer Sergei Uruzevsky is his name. He's on record saying that his intention in his collaborations with Kalatozov, whose birth name is Georgian. It's Kalatozov Vishli.
Yes, yeah,
Also, fun fact: Stalin is Georgian.
that's right. Yes, I did know that.
Um, but his intention was to convey a spiritual realism about what the characters are feeling, and he thought you couldn't just do that with like the with regular social realist means.
I don't really have a lot to say about this movie. I just really like it. I was really happy that I watched it again. I'd seen it like twice before, but I don't know. This time it really hit the spot for me.
Yeah, it's really good. I like the inside. The interiors are all claustrophobic and unsteady in a way that um, predicts what's going to happen to this family. And it's the movie begins with all of these dinner conversations, but then we never return to a dinner setting ever again.
Yeah.
The comfort of the hearth in the home is blown away, quite literally. But then these outside shots, like the deep focus photography of the war scenes, is something I don't think I've seen that beautifully until Tarkovsky. The lead performance by Tatiana Samoilova is expert. I think giving her a special citation is great. Although I do wonder what the purpose is of a special citation instead of giving somebody best actress. The special awards always throw me for a loop.
Yeah, it's partly because the president has probably said you can only give this movie one prize. And
Mm.
sometimes the jury doesn't listen and they do whatever they want. But other times, if they listen, then they say, fine, then we're going to give a special citation.
But speaking more about her, she is responsible to be both. She's accountable as a silent film actor. She has to hold so many close ups.
Yep.
While at the same time, she has to do a lot of balletics. Like she
Yeah.
has to do a lot of running. She has to stay in the center of the camera while it's tracking her upstairs and through the
Yeah.
streets. Uh, she really lights up the screen. And I didn't even realize that it was the same actress from Letter Never Sent. Now I look forward to rewatching that one, seeing if I enjoy it anymore.
And I just wonder all the mechanics of pulling off all those tracking shots and all the things that they involve, because they are really complicated. Although, as I've said before, in a country where everyone just threatens to kill your whole family if you don't do what they want, maybe it's easier to get people to just redo a shot over and over again until everything's exactly right. I don't know.
You might enjoy the documentary that's in the Criterion, and you can watch it on the channel as well. It's called Hurricane Kalatozov, and it shows them filming Letter Never Sent, which has a lot of fire scenes.
Oh yes.
And you are completely right. The fire is so uncontrolled, and they probably don't. It's probably not a union job.
Yeah, yeah. It's probably a. Didn't someone die making that movie? No, they didn't.
Yes, well said.
I don't know where you heard that. Yeah,
We don't talk about that.
yeah. And then the guy who asked that question, his son for some reason can't get into a school for the rest of his life, and no one knows why. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. He all of a sudden dies of a stroke. I highly recommend it. I recommend this trilogy of collaborations between Kalatozov and Uruzevsky to our listeners. Start with this one or I Am Cuba, and then make time for Letter Never Sent, because
Yeah.
it is more interesting in conversation with them.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm just so happy that we did this movie, and it is a stunner that no Soviet or Russian movie has won since.
Yeah. And in fact, I don't think a Russian movie has won since Perestroika either.
No, nothing comes to my mind.
And has anything from Eastern Europe won since then, is what I'm also curious about.
No, I don't
No,
think so.
I don't have the list in front of me.
Poland won. Has probably won, although pre-perestroika.
Yes, Man of Iron is in the early 80s. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess maybe you could call that a Soviet film. I don't know. But Soviet means USSR, right? Not Iron Curtain.
Yeah, not Warsaw
Yeah.
Pact.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Greg, looking over the films that played in competition in 1958, do you agree with the Palme choice, or would you give the Palme d'Or to another film that played in competition?
No, I think they gave it to the right one. They gave it to the one that is the most high art, even by today's standards. The one that really shouts like state of the art European cinema. I think Brink of Life is great, but it is just a sign of what there's more of to come with Bergman.
I think you're right. I also agree because it's the movie that really has it all, like it
Mhm.
has the great art, it has the intelligence, the class, but it also has deep feeling as well, and it makes me care about people. And so I walk away from this one feeling fuller than I do from all the other films, including the really good ones, because I
Mhm.
think Brink of Life is appropriately a somewhat less indulgent experience, and that's its brilliance.
Mhm.
And then Mononcla is also like it's this like razor sharp, perfect work of art that has no humanity to it, or not. It does, ironically, but it's not, a
Yeah, it's a
sentimental film in
confection.
any way. Yeah. So I think they chose the right film. But a last question, Greg. If you were going to give a Palme d'Or to any film from 1958, I don't know how you'd give it to any other one than my choice, but what would you give it to?
We really you have, if you're trying to be masturbatory and flex imagination, you can try to give it to Ashes and Diamonds or The Touch of Evil, but you're fucking with yourself. It's Vertigo.
Of course, it's Vertigo. It's recently voted the greatest movie of all time for a very good reason. It's been my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie since long before it was cool to say that. I can't even count the amount of times I've seen this one on the big screen, and certainly not how many times I've seen it on the small. It's Hitchcock's most perfect movie, as is not surprising to anyone. Never appreciated in its time, including by him. Um, there's a scene in the Hitchcock movie with Anthony Hopkins where he's up all night stressing over Psycho, saying, "What if I have another Vertigo on my hands?" But it's just an incredible film.
It is, and it's one of the few film scores I just listen outside of the film.
Yep, reused in a Cannes Film Festival winner, The Artist.
And reused in a Cannes Best Screenplay winner, The Substance.
Oh, that's right. Of course, yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
And it has one of my favorite pieces of Jimmy Stewart's dialogue. Then I shall call you Mr. Ferguson. Oh no! Don't do that. My friends just call me Scotty.
That's a very good James Stewart. I didn't know you did that so well. Oh wow! I'm gonna have you call me up in the middle of the night and do that.
You were a very
Get
good
me
pupil, weren't you? You were a good pupil.
Spitting imagery.
Spitting image, right?
Oh, that
Bill,
was so good. You know what else I
before,
learned from that film is that the way men hid their balding in those days, if you notice in that film, his front hair has been grown super long and is combed and slicked all the way to the back of his head.
oh, I think that looks better than sweeping to the side.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of Italian men doing that in Rome, and they pull
Yeah.
it off, especially with like the layers
Yeah.
that they like the layering of clothing that they do even in the summertime. It
Yeah.
just looks graceful.
Greg, as always, a pleasure. Tell our listeners what we're doing next.
Well, before I do that, I have already caught myself in a gaffe and have to have to apologize for an incorrection I made in our last episode. I had suggested that Le Huitième Jour was the very first time that a jury gave an acting prize to two actors from the same movie. That was probably true for the Best Actor award, but this year proves that it's not the first time it was done for any acting at
Oh, I
all.
think you did say that though.
I think
Yeah.
I worry I made it seem like it was the first time it had ever been done for a movie.
I think it was me who put that in the notes though, so I don't know.
No, the way you
Yeah.
put it in the notes was like first time they ever gave a tie period.
Oh, all right. Well, I assume it's Mike nitpicking these details again, because it's always Mike who's getting up in our craw.
Yeah. No, let's talk more about the what listeners can look forward to for our next episode.
What's our next episode, Greg?
We are going to fast forward to 2017, the year of the square.
The year that every Cannes movie was about how kids and their cell phones are ruining everything.
Yep. Looking
That'll be
forward
my
to
thesis. Yeah. All right. Well, I will see you then, Greg. As always, a pleasure. Thank you for doing this, and see you soon.
it. See you soon. Thank you for listening to Riviera Rats.
Our podcast is hosted and produced by Bill Antoniou and Gregory Roseborough.
Our music is by Joe Organ.
Our artwork is by Leo Kuvaris.
Follow us on Instagram at Riviera Rats.
Write to us at ratsriviera@gmail.com.
If you want to support our show, tell your friends about us.
Leave us a rating and a review on whatever podcast app you use.